I remember walking with my sister towards the Ochil Hills. They were just there. Hills, mountains even, and all covered in snow. Under a low winter sun they looked pink, like giant blancmanges that sat in a faraway land that simply had to be investigated. We walked and walked and walked, over fence and wall, cross field after field as if drawn by an unseen force. But we never got there. No matter how far we walked, there remained this untouchable distance. And as we headed back to our new home, we knew we'd return. Someday. Well, I've escaped from Glasgow. And I have to be honest that on the bus from Stirling to here, I almost shed a tear because the hills looked utterly beautiful. The yellow broom is out, very strong colour, very dark yellow, a bit of orange in it. It was just stunning. I hope you can see it for yourself. This is Alva, what's termed one of the Hillfoots towns in Clackmannanshire. This along with Menstrie and Tillicootery. And the hills that they sit at the foot of is the Ochil Hills. And this is the southern face of the Ochil Hills. And they rise really quite dramatically out of a flat karst that runs for a couple of miles in that direction towards the River Forth. And it's that sudden dramatic rise that just makes them absolutely stunning. You know, I've been here many times in the past. Used to stay in Alva, and that first glimpse of these hills many, many years ago in the 1960s was just something else. I'll never forget. And no matter how often I've been here, they never fail to amaze and impress. So today we'll start with a very brief look at the town's industrial past. I mean, I knew in a kind of vague way that Alva was a mill town. You know, you only have to look at the town from a distance or from any number of different angles to see the large building that sits above the town that screams mill at you. But I didn't fully appreciate how many mills there were in the town. So we'll have a look at some maps and it will kind of reveal all. And then we'll head for the hills. With any luck we'll manage to find the source of a lot of silver that was dug out the ground and used during a pretty major Jacobite rising in 715. And then we'll head for the hills. We're going to end on a viewpoint on top of the Nebit, which is a kind of little hill that sits just above the town. Views from there are just going about this world. So, without further ado, welcome to Alva. In this old map of Clackmannanshire dating to 1681, you can see the Hillfoots towns, the town of Menstrie, Tillicoutre and Alva, each with its own spelling peculiarities. Alva is actually spelt as Alvo, and Tillicoutre is spelt rather unusually as Tillicountry. Mixing up your vowels must have been quite common in the old days. But it's only when we look at mid-19th century Ordnance Survey maps, in this case dated to 1862, that we really see the extent of Alva's woollen industry. South of the town's main street there was the Cobblecrook Mill, Meadow Mill and Greenfield Mill, all woollen mills. On the north of the main street there was the Bridge Mill, Island Mill, Brayhead Mill, Boll Mill, which we will look at shortly, Upper Strude Mill and Lower Strude Mill, again all woollen mills. There was also a corn mill. Most of these mills used the power of water from the Alva burn to drive their machinery, each having their own mill lathe that diverted the water that turned their water wheel. In total, that's 9 woollen mills, a major industry and employer in the area that in Alva is now completely gone. Tell you what, instead of heading for the hills right away, let's just have a look at that iconic old mill building that sits above the town. Well, this is the Boll Mill, or was the Boll Mill. that iconic mill structure that sits above Alva, that's recognisable from miles away, probably built about 1845 as one of the town's many woollen mills. Later it became incorporated into the Strude Mill, which was just on the other side of this building. And I think today it is known as the Strude Mill, but as we can see in an old map here, it was originally called the Boll Mill. It's now housing. Very nice to see it, they've kept it. Before going up the hill, I just thought I'd pop into Alva's old graveyard. Sometimes in graveyards you can get a flavour of a town's industrial past, because sometimes you'll get trades mentioned on the gravestones. The very old graveyard in the middle of Dundee is a good example of that, because it's on the Firth of Tay, and there's quite a few gravestones mentioning ship captains and such like. Fascinating. I've had a bit of a look around here and I can't really see anything that mentions the town's woolen industry. I saw one that mentioned somebody who was a chemist. I think maybe in certain parts of the country there's slightly different traditions, perhaps in some parts of the country, depending on who the stonemason was responsible for the gravestones, may have included some trades, or maybe families didn't want trades mentioned. It's, you know, I think there's variations across the country, and here there's not really much mention of trades at all. There is an argument for not doing any filming in graveyards at all, even one as old as this, because there will be descendants who would perhaps not want such a thing. I thought I'd take a chance on this one. This is an older part of the cemetery, and I came across this stone, which I think is very touching. I'll read it to you. It's sacred to the memory of David Drysdale, who died in the glen above Castle Campbell on the 2nd, I think that is, of May 1818, aged 10 years and 5 months. That's a very tragic tale, and pretty good reminder that some of these glens have always been dangerous places, and you have to take a lot of care even today. That's one of the silver mines down there. They're not accessible these days and they're fenced off anyway. They would be too dangerous. And this is Silver Glen. I think there was originally 9 silver mines. Probably started mining silver from them late 17th century, I think, roundabouts then, and perhaps mined in earnest from about 1714. It is indeed thought that the silver from these mines was used to fund a major Jacobite uprising in 1715 as led by the Earl of Mar. Utter silence. I'm sitting on a wooden stile here. There's quite a lot of sheep around, and you know, I've had ticks in the past. You pick up a tick. In fact, that last walk I was, where was I? I think it was in the Campsie Fells, Reflections in the Campsie Fells, I think it was, the video was called. I picked up 2 ticks, one just at the back of my calf. It was so small it was barely recognisable as a tick. Even when I removed it, I couldn't see legs or anything, but I mean, no doubt it was a tick. And I thought that was it, but then a few days later I was sort of washing at the sink and I just happened to kind of rub my hand over my backside and I thought, something's there that shouldn't be there, and it was a tick. And this one had fed. You know, it wasn't a full. I think they come in a variety of sizes and lifetime sort of stages and stuff. I've never had a really big tick. Most of the ticks I've had have been tiny wee things. This one was a kind of slightly bigger. It wasn't a big fat thing, but it was nevertheless slightly bigger than I've had, probably because it had fed in my blood. And when I did eventually manage to remove it and squashed it, there was blood, you know, my blood. This thing had been feeding on me for a few days, unbeknown to me. And you've got to kind of keep an eye on the bite location for a while, weeks, if not months in fact, just in case it develops into any kind of red, angry looking thing, a red ring around it, all of which would be signs that it's Lyme's disease. You know, you can get Lyme's disease off ticks, which can be very, very serious. So you've just got to be careful. So when I got that one, because at one point at the start of the video I was sitting on the ground. Okay, I was sitting on a plastic bag and there wasn't any sheep or anything around, but nevertheless That tick must just have been sitting in the grass waiting for me to come along. On the bus from Stirling there. It must be very difficult for bus drivers to tell the difference between Alva and Alva, especially if you're wearing a mask, because Alva and Alva sound very, very similar. Bus drivers behind a perspex screen, you're wearing a mask, hasn't got a clue where you're going. I mean, it was actually called, as I think we may have seen earlier, on one of these old maps, I think it was called Alvo. It was an O instead of an A. That would have worked if they'd kept that, you know. A single to Alvo, please. Alvo, Alawa. It's all in the vowels, isn't it? You can't beat onions in a bridie. Onions go with everything. It's all a matter of time before I go into a pub and say, a pint of beer please, and I'll have some onions with it. Just sprinkle a few onions on the top there. There's something deep within us all that needs to be in places like this. And sometimes we don't realise that we need it until we get here. Well, just going down the other side of the Nebit now and heading back into Alva. I'm just going to end the video here. The view heading down is just as stunning as all the rest of the views today. It has just been out of this world, it really has. Sometimes you forget how beautiful things are. And you can see everything. You've got the Firth of Forth before us, you can maybe see it there, the Kincardine Bridge. You can even see, very faint, but the three bridges at Queensferry. I'm Eddie Burns. Until the next time, take care.